So before I hand over to our presenters, it's probably helpful to quickly run through what we define as off-the-job training. So the definition you see there, it's a direct lift from the apprenticeship funding rules and can also be found on gov.uk. So off-the-job training is a statutory requirement for an English apprenticeship. It is training which is received by the apprentice within their practical period during the apprentice's normal working hours for the purpose of achieving the knowledge, skills and behaviours of the approved apprenticeship that is referenced in the apprenticeship agreement. And by normal working hours, by that we mean the hours for which the apprentice would normally be paid, excluding overtime. So we do have lots of guidance available on this, and we can share links to this in the chat and in our communication after the webinar. However, this slide breaks it down into what off-the training includes and what it doesn't. As you can see, off-the-job training must teach new knowledge, skills and behaviours and be directly relevant to the apprenticeship standard. So this doesn't include training that, despite maybe being relevant to the broader job role, isn't required for the apprenticeship standard. Nor does it include onboarding activities, progress reviews, on-programme assessment or English and maths training up to and including level 2. What it can include in terms of the teaching of theory is online learning, lectures, role-playing and practical training. Could include a range of activities such as shadowing, mentoring, industry visits, so long as the activity has been agreed with the learning provider and is documented as part of the agreed training plan. And as already mentioned, it takes place within the apprentice's normal working hours. So what our presenters will do today is to showcase what off-the-job training looks like in their apprenticeship programs and their businesses, which should help contextualise the definition that you've just seen, provide some examples of how it's delivered in their workplaces, and give you very real ideas of how you navigate this part of the programme for maximum efficiency. So I'm going to stop talking now, and I am very happy to hand over to today's presenters. We have 3 fantastic companies represented today: Dogs Play Limited, FD Works and Less Than Zero Barbers. So I'm now going to hand over to Matt Priestley from Dogs Play Limited to get us started.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt, and I'm going to go through how reframing off-job training and putting it into our day-to-day has helped drive our bottom line. I'll turn off my camera while I'm presenting if that's all right, but that's just me if everyone can see me. Right, next slide. So who are we? We're a small dog daycare business based in South Derbyshire. We've been trading, my wife and I, since 2015. Turnover of just under 500,000 a year. We're licensed by another government department, DEFRA, with an animal boarding license. And we have 12 full-time employees. And that split 60-40, 40-60 is between apprentice and full-time employees, which I'll touch on later as I go through my slides. Top line, what apprentices really bring for us is they bring that first job, clean slate opportunity. So we listen to these new people. They come in and they see stuff that we don't see. We're into the day-to-day of running a business, keeping dogs and people safe and making sure they have a nice time. So new people coming in is really good for our business. They have really different skills in a ever fast changing world. They are so media savvy, social media savvy. Me, I'm in my 50th year this year. I'm not so media savvy, as my kids would say. So these guys bring really good, solid thinking into how we talk on social media. And the other thing that they provide is they help us manage our churn. We're generally a first or second job company for most of these people. So they're going to go through a journey. Hopefully we can make their life experience moving from school into the workplace a smoother transition. But we sort of fully understand that they might go on to other things. So we've had people go on to university. We've had people leave the industry. People set up their own businesses. It all sort of comes into the melting pot. What we do know is they're probably not going to be working with us when they're 65. Next slide. So Why is a small dog daycare business relevant to any other SME? Well, basically, I think we've all got some headwinds coming at us. There are some things that we can be in control of, and there's some things we can't be in control of. Tax and legislation is something that we can't really get our heads around. It's sort of delivered to us, but our overheads are something we can control. And I think there are some similarities that SMEs can look at across the board, and some of the language or the terms hopefully will be similar. Next slide. So for us, there are lots of little things about overheads that we can do, but linking three things together has really, really worked for us and help us drive our cost savings and manage our costs with regards to overheads. So the right training provider was the first one. Before, we had a training provider that was doing the framework. We've now moved to a different training provider after the pandemic, but that provider gives us real support. So the tutor is hands-on. We've got backroom support, and flexibility that they give us around giving mutual wins for them and for us really, really helps. We've then embraced technology. We've got young people working for us. They love smartphones. We were quite anti them to start with, but then actually once we've embraced them and integrated them into how we do our business, that has really unlocked some big savings for us in time, our own time, as in my wife and I, as well as the guys that are working for us. And then finally, next one, integrating those off-job learning into our daily operations, a big part of the solution. So I'll break down those three and just drill into them one by one over the next 3 slides. So first one, find the right training provider for us. As I just mentioned, our old supplier was using the old framework and was struggling to get the training and change the apprenticeship to the new EPA endpoint assessment standard. So the old framework, it was like the old GCSE where they did coursework. The EPA is similar, but there is an endpoint assessment where someone third party comes in and assesses the team as they have finished their apprenticeship. The new supplier gives us backroom support. The tutor is definitely part of our team. Kurt's there in the pictures, you can see him. We've found efficiency versus shared goals, and we do remote learning where appropriate, and we link the qualification to both the business needs and the processes that we have to provide for our license requirements, and that's been the real game changer. Next one. So technology, first things first. There's studies out there that say using smartphones can save 58 minutes a day. So 58 minutes a day, if you break that down into that off-job learning requirement, which is 6 hours a week or 20%, whichever the greater or smaller, sorry. Just by having those smartphones in our business has saved us more than an hour a day. And that's not just the apprentice's time, that's my time and my wife's time as well. From an apprentice point of view, they would get, I'll just highlight some wins from both sides of the coin. Their availability, so we use a program called Jolt to manage our scheduling. They can see their availability. It makes efficient planning for us. We know the guys, when they've seen what shifts they're doing, when they are on duty and when they're not, they book their holidays. It's all very efficient. Next one. Fairness and clarity around jobs lists. They see what they've got to do, when they've got to do it. And from our perspective, it's license compliant. It shows license compliance when we are audited by a license provider. Next. Internal communications and media, and it's tracked. So we get, if there's any messages that we have to go through, we know who's read them, when they've read them. And that's really simple rather than sticking notes up in staff rooms. Training, we've got visual reminders. So the program we use also helps us do short videos for training so they can remind themselves if they've already been trained. There's a reminder, or there's pictures that we can upload for each of the jobs that they have to do on those lists. So we've got one standard which is really clear. Next. Marketing, the guys take lots of our marketing. We use social media to show people what we do. It's free and it's relevant content, and the guys see it as a big reward when they see their photos being published. And finally, I think what we see here is just what the apprentices see on the left-hand side. They see the tools, where they're going, the photos, the videos of the training that they need to do. And from a management point of view, when our license provider comes in and says, we want an audit you, we've got all that information at our fingertips for any date that they want. Next slide. So for us, it's about bringing these things together. So firstly, we've got our needs. So that's the license requirement that I keep on going on about. And we facilitate that into what we call our Bible or our procedures. So we've got a set of procedures and the way we do stuff, which is there. Then we've got the actual apprenticeship itself, and that's the training that we provide. And then we've got the off-job training, and that links finally then to how we break that down. So our apprenticeship and our provider have broken that down into 9 modules. Each of those modules has off-job training attached to it, and we look at those through those lenses. So the lens of the license, our Bible, and the apprenticeship itself. And the more we can bring into that center point where it covers what our needs are, what the apprenticeship needs are, and what the apprentice is actually doing, that's where the real efficiency comes to. So those 9 modules break down over a 12-month period into 6.5 hours a week. Each of the team have got their I've got their own folder, and as they tick through, that's reviewed by the trainer when he comes in, so they know the modules have been done, and we capture that on the board on the left-hand bottom center, so they all know how many hours they've done and what module they've done, and we progress the apprentice through a journey. Final slide, I think. So from our perspective, I've got some do's and I've got a couple of do nots. From our perspective, we really embrace the fresh eyes that the apprentices bring, really focus on picking a training provider that provides for your specific needs. If you can integrate your apprenticeship study into the day-to-day, that's where you'll unlock real value. We've looked at technologies really helped us value and save time and money, not only that of the apprentices, but also our time and money that we invest in training them. And then the final thing is review every apprenticeship off. All 3 parties should look at it. Is there any way we could make this better the next time? Our do nots, don't think of it as cheap labour. And don't also worry if an apprentice doesn't work out. It's a first job for lots of people in our industry. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. There will be someone that it does work for. And that's me.
Thank you, Matt. That was incredibly insightful. And I think you've made some really key points there around ensuring you work closely with providers to influence and shape course content to make it relevant to your business and the job, as well as it ensuring it meets the requirements of the apprenticeship standards. So that sweet spot that you identified. Also, loved your point around utilising personal phones rather than viewing them as a distraction in the workplace. I think that's a great idea. Okay, so I'm now going to hand over to today's next presenter, and that is Kim Slater from FD Works. Thanks, Kim.
Hello, everyone. So just a brief introduction to me and FD Works. So we're a business and finance specialist based in Bristol. We support other SMEs to make sort of ambitious moves and high growth SMEs, really. I actually joined the business as a digital marketing apprentice a few years ago, and now I've gone on to take a lot of different roles within the business as well. Next. So what I want to talk about really is the culture of learning that you have in your business. So if you aren't making learning priority, then I don't really see how you can expect your apprentices to do the same. You can't dictate a culture, you have to role model it. So it starts with you first, really. How are you prioritizing your own learning? What can you learn from the people around you? And how are you sort of showing what you're learning, and are you doing that loudly? We're really big on making mistakes very loudly and experimenting often within our business, which I think allows people, particularly that are new to the industry, to feel comfortable doing the same and asking the stupid questions and making the mistakes as well. Often our founder and MD, Jonathan Gaunt, will share something that he's learned during meetings at the start of the meeting as a check-in, which I think is a really valuable way to go about it. Next. So how can you make learning more of a culture in your business? So one of the things that we do is we try and identify the experts that we've already got in the room. So while people might be coming to you with no experience in your particular industry, they are bound to have skills and perhaps even previous experience that they can bring to the table. And I think it's really important to make sure that you're valuing those transferable skills and just natural skills that some people have over others. So how do you go about this? Next. So the way that we do it is we really enforce sort of peer learning. So what we do is we have an open spreadsheet. We have a facilitator who that sort of role changes around depending on who's passionate about it. But the topics are requested by the team. So as you can see down the bottom here, we've got some finance related topics on the left-hand side, but we also make sure that we have some softer skills. Don't really like that term, but on the right-hand side. So there's things like written communication and making sure that you are comfortable using the phone, picking up the phone to clients, things like that. There's also things like leadership and planning and productivity, even things like mental health and how to look after yourself better. So these topics are all requested by the team, and then the facilitator will organise a workshop every 2 weeks. The people who deliver the workshops are people who are in the team themselves. So we put a training expert next to each topic. This might be somebody who already has the skills or is really up for going and learning the skills. So mental health is a really interesting one that we brought in last year sometime, and we've had a handful of people go on a mental health first aid training course so that they can come to these workshops with some really valuable information as the experts. Whereas there are other sort of topics like written communications, for instance. I come from a journalism background, so I've sort of got that nailed, and I can be the expert with that. So each expert comes up with their own plan and their own time frame, which they decide that they'll be ready by to produce a workshop. And these workshops are based around a handful of frameworks. They might be a 15-minute one, it might be an hour, it might even be longer, but we make sure that we give them a lot of different frameworks to work on, so they're not having to also provide those presentation skills and run an interesting, engaging presentation as well as focusing on their topic. So liberating structures is something that I would really encourage everybody to go and Google, but they provide 30 different versions of how to run effective meetings, making sure that you're getting the right thing from each meeting, whether that's ideas or just opinions or even just making a decision. So we found those really valuable, and it means that the apprentices are prepared on how to give a presentation, not just around a particular topic. They're not mandatory, you don't have to go to these workshops, but if you do decide to go, there are certain expectations. We expect people to do the preparation beforehand. There'll always be an agenda. Usually there'll be maybe a piece of reading or a podcast to listen to, but it's not super heavy in terms of resource and time. So the best way I thought I could illustrate this was to talk about one of our experts, Hannah. Go to the next slide, that's it. So Hannah joined us around about 18 months ago now. So she's just coming to the end of her level 3 AAT. She actually studied her level 2 alongside working in hospitality. She thrived in hospitality, didn't really know what she wanted to do when she left school, so just jumped into a job and ended up as an assistant manager by around the age of 20, 21. So she was naturally great in hospitality, and this is because she has a few natural skills that really did well in that sort of environment. So these things like leadership, customer service, feedback and coaching all did her really well in her hospitality job. Now she's come to us. We don't want to just ignore those. Just because she is doing her level 3 finance qualification doesn't mean that these things are not useful to us. They're incredibly valuable. So we make sure that we value her and give her space to share her knowledge, and in return it makes the rest of the team better at these sort of things as well. She has sort of said to me, and coming from hospitality myself, these sort of skills are not often recognized in office type roles, particularly if you are a young person, if you are new to the industry, they're quite often brushed off. I think sometimes you can assume that just because you work in an office and you might be customer based, but you're not sales, you don't need great customer service skills, but we're really customer focused. And I think most successful businesses are really people led now. So having somebody who can really coach new people on how to give great customer service is really valuable to our team. Next. I, however, didn't have such a great experience when I joined. I joined as a marketing manager, and I was a team of one. So I was the first hire outside of the finance function, if you want. So I didn't have any direct peers. We don't have a hierarchy. We're a self-managed business, which meant that I didn't have a line manager. And honestly, I didn't get that much support from my training provider outside of the core curriculum of these things. And my experience really highlighted the importance of the community, particularly of our founder, Jonathan. So he was really on top of this, and within a few weeks he sort of understood that I didn't really have a soundboard, I didn't really have somebody to learn from. It was really a lot of book learning and then going to my classes. So he made sure to put me in touch with experts within his community. So these are people that he's worked with in the past, people who are friends of friends of friends who are perhaps in a similar position to me. He even found somebody who was working for an apprenticeship provider to put me in touch with some more peers doing a similar course to me. So it really sort of highlighted the benefits of like looking around and seeing the value that you've got in the people already around you. They don't need to be public speakers or people who run courses. It could just sometimes be going for a coffee with somebody who's a couple of steps above you, just a soundboard. And I found that that was the thing that made me feel really valued and really sort of important within business. So have a think, what can you learn from people within your network already, whether they're the apprentices that are already in your team, whether they're the people that you've met through networking or similar events, or people from your past jobs. I think there's a lot of value to be had, and I think it's just a case of looking at people's skills and what they're really good at, and sort of making sure that you're acknowledging those skills and making the most of them. Next. So just to round up, if you're going to take away a few tips from me today, I would say start with an audit of the skills within your business and where the gaps are. Are you going to fill those gaps with recruitment, or are you going to fill them with training? Is the training going to be off-the-job training, similar to what we're talking about, doing peer training and using your provider, just like Matt talked about? Or is it going to be outside experts, mentors, coaches, that sort of thing? Use that audit to understand who the experts are within your business already. And like I said, where you can use some external help as well, and make space for the apprentices to get together and share their knowledge informally. So once a month, all of our apprentices are invited out for lunch. There's no one else around, it's just the apprentices, and they always, without fail, come back with some amazing ideas, because they realize a lot of the struggles that they're facing are ones that the other apprentices are facing too. So they sound them out, figure them out without anybody to look to for an answer who they feel like should know better. They actually get really creative and innovative. So we always make space for that. And make learning a part of your daily or weekly practice, and be loud about it. Make sure that you're sharing when you make mistakes. If you read a great book, listen to a great podcast, read an article online, share it with your team. Make sure that they know that you think learning is important, no matter what sort of stage of your career you're at. And then celebrate. So, we celebrate Hannah by asking her to run these workshops and things like that. That's not for everybody. Not everybody is going to want to be an expert. But Hannah absolutely loves it, and it makes her feel like she's a really important part of the team, which for us is just the most important thing when it comes to apprentices. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Kim. Such useful advice there in harnessing the knowledge of existing employees and, interestingly, of apprentices. And I think that's a powerful way of building learning and confidence, so it benefits everyone. And used in tandem with what your provider provides as well, I think that's fantastic. A skills audit too, another nugget of helpful advice to understand where there are gaps in your business. Thanks ever so much. I'd like to hand over to our final presenter today, Martin Wallace-Keyworth from Less Than Zero Barbers. Over to you, Martin.
Hi, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining. First of all, I'd like to say I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you today, particularly when we are celebrating National Apprentice Week. So that's great. So thank you for joining. Excuse me. So first of all, I think as part of what you will hear from me, I want to build upon what Matt and Kim have said. So I will give you a little bit of background in terms of the business, how we see it, some of the challenges that we've had, and also how we've actually addressed them. Next slide, please. So basically, I set the business up in 2017, And first of all, I decided that we were going to go with Realise. Obviously, prior to that, it was Interserve as a training provider. And the reason that I did that, I liked the fact that not only were they able to provide qualifications in and around the industry sector that I work within, but also that they would be able to provide other add-on qualifications. And I feel that that is extremely important in terms of being able to look at continual professional development and understanding actually what continual professional development means, which I will explain. Next slide, please. So basically, in terms of my business, what we tend to find is that, very much like Kim said, in terms of their business is self-managed, we are up to a certain point in terms of an organisation. It's about ensuring that you're taking in the right people with the right mindset, that you're able to add value to them, that you understand what their aspirations are in terms of their career goals, understanding what motivates them, ensuring that they're inquisitive and they're critical thinkers, because all of this will add to you being able to understand fully how to add value back to them. And in essence, the reason for all of that, ultimately, what we are trying to do is create a high-performing team and ensure that our apprentices know that whilst ever they're in the business, they will be able to have opportunity to learn throughout their careers. Next slide, please. So in terms of how we look at apprentices and how we view them, it's very similar to what Matt said, in that we are looking at bringing in people into the organisation with a different skill set. We see the whole business and the whole learning experience somewhat as individual jigsaw pieces, whereby there will be formal training courses, there will be conferences, there will be the ability to read articles, you name it. And it, again, all this goes back to how this was originally opened, and Jill explained this, that there's a plethora of opportunity out there. Sometimes, as leaders within the business, we just need to almost coax people into the right way of understanding what and how they can learn. Next slide, please. So in terms of training and versus the continual professional development, I think that if we go back to, I guess, what the standards say, and the 6 hour average off the job training for apprentices, then there's a plethora of ways in which that can be provided. And what we have found is that by adopting an approach whereby everyone within the business is always on a course, even myself, we're always learning. I think that the way in which we can provide that training and learning opportunity is actually, I think we're overthinking things a little bit too much. That if you have got the the groundwork's in place to enable you to have a successful business, and you were always looking at opportunities to develop your business, develop yourself, and develop your teams, then when we bring in apprentices to the organisation, then they will naturally just fall into the that way of working. Next slide, please. So I think that consider it in terms of breadth and depth, that we can look at ways in which we can give people opportunity to deep dive into a specific area of their role. But equally, we can look for opportunities of increasing the breadth of their knowledge and increasing their role. But all of this is extremely beneficial to the learner, to the wider team, and to the business, because fundamentally, learning should be one of the key focal points of any leader within the business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. I think it's great that you've helped explain how it's in the employer's own interest to ensure that off-the-job training is meaningful and properly applied to add real impact to performance in the same way as all continued professional development does. And I think you've done a great job in highlighting that there's so much potential to build on and expand the training offer that's provided to your apprentices too. So a massive thank you to all our presenters today. I think you've done a brilliant job in putting off-the-job training under the microscope and just drawing out how to get the best out of it by engaging with and working closely with providers from the very beginning. And some of the ideas you've talked about today, I think, have really demonstrated that off-the-job training is most effective when it's incorporated into your business and not simply viewed as a separate entity that lives solely in the provider's remit. Because as employers, you are best placed to judge the quality and relevance of training, and you do have the opportunity to shape what this looks like with your provider. So hopefully many of you attending today have been able to take something away that can help guide the way you implement the off-the-job element in your own programs. So thank you for that. Apologies, I think we're slightly overrunning almost, but thanks to those who are staying with us. If you do need to leave, you will receive a copy of the recordings, slides and Q&A. But for the final couple of minutes, we're just going to take a look at some of the questions in the chat. So thank you to everyone who's posted. Some have already been answered, but if I can turn to my colleague Anthony to see if there are any questions that we can draw out to ask presenters to come in and respond where they can.
Thanks, Jill, and morning, everybody. Yeah, I saw that Sam asked about the website, Liberation something, and Danielle's put Liberating Structures. Was that the correct one, Kim?
Yeah, so I can't actually see the comments, I'm afraid. So if anyone has got any questions, then I'm sure they can send them on afterwards. But yeah, Liberating Structures.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks for that, Danielle. And then another one for you, Kim, which came from Hannah Bibby. I'd be interested to learn what marketing apprenticeship you did, because they've recently taken on a young person with a marketing background.
Yeah, so I did digital marketing level 3, and actually we've just taken on in the last few months a content creator apprentice as well, who's doing her level 3, which is the new version of the junior content production apprenticeship. But yeah, definitely worth looking into.
Yeah, and I mean, what they've also said is they thought it'd be hard because they're not a marketing company. Can you share any insights on that? Yeah,
I mean, I hesitate to be biased about it, but I think marketing is really relevant for any business, and even if it is just a one person like myself. Yeah, so it's one of those things that you learn along with your apprentice. So my boss had very little knowledge about marketing in theory. He really invested with how important it was, but he didn't have any technical understanding of it. So we learned along together. And also I had sort of a buddy that sort of introduced me to the company, Mike, who has a background in graphic design, but again, no marketing sort of theory. And the training provider was really able to bring us both along for that journey. And I know that you can find training providers who have workshops for employers as well. So maybe every 3 months or so, just a morning where they can talk about problems that they're having and how to support their apprentices better. So I think that's really valuable as well. But equally, like I said, finding outside experts in your community, I think, is really valuable. You don't need to know the ins and outs, but just more on what ways to point them, to signpost them to getting the best information.
Brilliant.
And Anthony, it's worth saying we've also got someone who's doing a marketing apprentice, because, as Kim says, it's integral really to every business. So yeah, we've got somebody who is doing that. We've got somebody else who is doing a customer service apprenticeship as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Martin. And I'll just take one more. We'll follow up on the other ones later. But Manisha has just made a point. So an SME must appoint a training provider who provides relevant training courses. Have I understood that correctly? Yes. You definitely need a training provider to deliver an apprenticeship. And then you've said, do the training providers help recruit the apprentices? Some do. Some will provide that service. So it's one of the things that you could ask for. So they would potentially help you to do that if that's something that you need. And in terms of ensuring the apprentices being managed and trained correctly, I mean, the point's already kind of been made. Treat your apprentices like other employees, so you should be managing them as you would any other employee. But certainly a training provider will provide some really good advice about, what different things you might want to put in place, extra things for an apprentice to make it successful and to help them achieve. Okay, I'll hand over back to you now, Jill, and we will follow up on the other questions we haven't got to after the event.
Sure. No, thanks, Anthony. And yes, we definitely will. There's probably quite a few questions that I can't see in the chat, but we will get the answers to you and we'll send them out to everyone along with the recording as well. And a big thank you again to all your questions, all of you, but also our presenters for giving up their valuable time to support other employers today. I'm just popping another poll in the chat to complete, but there's also a short survey which we'd be really grateful if you could complete as well, because your feedback really does help shape future webinars. So that link is also going into the chat. And just to remind you, today's webinar was the 4th in our SME webinar series. So these webinars are running approximately once a month, with each one focused on a specific topic and delivered by employers. You can see the schedule on the screen there, and we do have more confirmed topics and dates to follow. So links of how to register are going to go into the chat. It does look like the next one's fully booked, but where we do have webinars that are fully booked, you still have the option of signing up to receive links to recordings of the webinar. So we'll put that link into the chat as well. And we'll also send them out as part of today's webinar follow-up. So you should receive all that in the next 7 days. Apologies again for overrunning by a couple of minutes, but just wanted to highlight where else you could go to access additional support. Again, we've put a list together that we can send out to you, but if you do have any general queries about apprenticeships, please do contact the apprenticeship helpline to speak to one of our advisors, or you can email them as well. Also want to draw your attention to the top 50 SME employer rankings, which have opened for 2023 entry today. I think the link will go into the chat for that as well. And a reminder to look at what else is going on in National Apprenticeship Week. So there's videos, webinars, stories, sector-specific events, which are being delivered by businesses, providers, and all sorts of organisations from all over the country. So very much worth taking a look at those if you can. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our next webinar.